When was the last time you took a picture? Raise your hand if it was today. A selfie?
My name is Lindsay Young, and I teach 9th through 12th grade English language development. My students are not only in mild to moderate special education, but they're also long-term English language learners. We have been working on generating literal and inferential questions, but when we read text, it's difficult to get them to make inferences. The reading levels in my class range from 2nd to 7th grade. And then you're trying to get them to do this critical analysis, which is also challenging. Why would you teach two challenging things, at one time? So the thought process is look at art, teach them how to analyze, then they'll know how to analyze, so then you can have them look at a text. And now the challenging thing is no longer the analysis because they know how to do that. Now the only challenging thing that we're dealing with is reading.
Okay, so can anybody else tell me the last picture that they posted on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat?
Drinking Starbucks at Vaughn's at my workplace.
That is a great one. Okay, that's a great one because that says so many things about you right off the bat.
So I started class today with an attention grabber by making the students realize every time they take a picture and put it on Facebook or Instagram, they're creating art. And they're analyzing it the same way we would analyze a piece of art in a museum.
What does that say about David?
He likes coffee.
Yeah, okay, so he likes coffee. That coffee's a prop. But second of all, the setting at his job, he is employed. And that's a cool thing to be, right? These are all things that you look at when you take pictures and you show them to people you're trying to send a message.
I had the graphic organizer on the whiteboard, poster size, and I tried to get the students to mention all of the elements I was looking for. The clothing, gesture, posture, facial expression, setting, and props. When David said that he had a Starbucks cup in his hand, and I said, okay, Starbucks, that's a prop. So I went ahead and just put a check by that. And then setting, he mentioned he was at work, so I put a check by setting. It's just so important, especially with English language learners, to have visual representation.
The 4 photos, they had portraits. And this was a painting of one person or a group of people. I want everybody to circle the word portrait. But you guys are lucky because how many pictures can you take in 1 minute? Tell me.
40, probably 30.
45.
How long do you think it took to paint a portrait?
Months at a time.
Months at a time. So you only had one picture of yourself. So you thought of everything. Nothing was done on accident. If they were holding a Starbucks, which they weren't because this was a long time ago, but there would be a definite reason. So today we're going to read portraits like we would read a story. Here is our first portrait that we're going to look at.
The next step was look at portraits, and then I put up a piece of Getty artwork. And we're going to read art just like we would a text, using all of the elements that you just talked about. But I also said we're going to do close reading. I'm just going to focus on clothing and setting because I felt at this point they're most familiar with that.
We've all learned the word literal, and we've been working on that. So, it's right here, underline it on your paper, the word literal. Who can tell me what this means? You can what to it?
You just point to it.
Yes, you can just point to it. Guys, write that in. You can point to it.
The reason that I have the graphic organizer up and I'm saying, okay, circle this, underline this, is because I need an opportunity to model, but I also need to make sure that they're somehow actively engaged.
So I'm going to start with clothing, and I'm just going to look at the children. Things I can point to. The children are wearing white dresses. So I'm going to write it right there. 3 children wearing white dresses. Now, we've talked about this before. We've talked about inference. And I want everybody to draw a line under inference, please. If you're making an inference, you must give what?
Evidence.
Evidence. You must give evidence. Yes, and you guys, we have done all the work here because this literal information, this is our evidence. Now, it's our job to make the inference and figure out what this means. Here's what I would think. 3 children wearing white dresses. When do I usually see people wearing white?
Weddings.
Good.
Or no, baptized.
Yes. So then I think, why do brides wear white when they get married?
Because they're virgin.
So what could white represent?
Purity.
Purity. You guys are expert inference makers. So the fact that they're all wearing white shows that they're pure. I can use this language to make the inference. I can say, I see 3 children wearing white dresses. This shows that they are pure and innocent. Now, can anybody wear silk or satin?
No, just upper class people.
Upper class people.
When they're like rich.
Rich, exactly. The inference is they are upper class or rich.
The final project of the lesson is the students are creating their own portraits. So they just learned how to analyze art using all the elements, and they have the graphic organizer. Now they all get different portrait scenarios. And they weren't supposed to let the other group see because it's going to be kind of like a competition. The group that analyzes correctly literal observations and inferences is going to win a prize.
I'm going to read it out loud, okay? This is a family portrait of a grandmother, grandfather, and their 2 grandchildren, okay, whom they take care of.
When they receive the portrait scenarios, instead of first pointing out what's literal, they have to work in reverse.
So how are you going to show the first thing that you are the grandmother and grandfather?
He has to wear like a beard, something old-fashioned, you know, because they're grandparents. So you guys have to wear old-fashioned.
So here, under inferences, write grandmother and grandfather, because that's the inference we're trying to get them to catch. Okay, and then for the literal thing, what should she write, guys? Tell her what to write.
Nice clothes.
Clothes on.
Okay, tucked in shirt. We have button-down shirts and ties.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So we brainstormed in our small groups. When we knew the props and background we were going to choose, we went over to the props. And I have a lot of props in my room.
Okay. Anyway.
Then we used Photo Booth to choose the background, so we could choose anything from Google Images. That was fun. And they took their photo. The curriculum comes from the Getty Center, and they have an amazing website that has so many teacher resources on it. So I took this lesson from their ESL curriculum, and I actually tweaked it for my students, which was the end project, which was having them create their own portraits. In the next lesson, they'll have their printed out photo, and they'll show it to the class, and the class will have to make literal observations and inferences. Today, they really learned what it means to be an artist because they had to create their own portraits. How every choice that they make, they're trying to get their audience to get something from it. The artist's intent. So when we look at a text now, and I say, why do you think that the author chose to use these words? Or why did the author choose this setting? I think that they really got the idea that nothing is on accident. There's a purpose behind every decision, the author's intent. And that adds a little bit of mystery. Today, the students received their portraits back, and the goal was for them to try to analyze each other's portraits using the same graphic organizer where they made the literal observations and then the inferences.
The group that makes the most literal observations paired with an inference wins. So I want to show you what I mean by that. So if I put my example up, my example's on the board, I ask you to make a literal observation about the props, what would you say?
Books.
Books. Yes, the literal observation about the props would be books. Now, what could the possible inference be?
They like to study.
Library.
Yeah, okay, let's go with that. Let's go with they like to study. So I just want to be clear about this. To get a point, you must have the correct literal observations and the correct inference. And this is hard because you're going to have to read the artist's intent. So we might get it wrong sometimes. It doesn't mean that it was an incorrect inference or that you didn't have the right evidence. It just means sometimes we don't know what the artist was thinking.
The next step was for us to break into small groups. During this part, one group is getting ready to present their portrait. The other two groups, they had 4x6s of the portrait, and they were going through a smaller version of the graphic organizer, writing down what they thought the answers were.
And the background looks like they're in a big community and there are people.
The purpose was twofold. They were making literal observations and inferences off of those, but also this is the part of the lesson where they really get to understand artists' intent.
Is that cars or money?
I think it's money. He's holding money.
So then from the group whose portrait was being analyzed, a student came up and kept score at the board and checked the answers.
Let's hear about the props.
There was a book, so we thought he was an educated boy. There is a racket in the picture, so we thought it was rich sporty girl. And cars that we thought meant he was a gambler.
Okay. Rita, will you come up here and keep score for the next two? So let's go to facial expression.
Facial expression. Rita's lips are straight, so she might be serious. And Alfred's biting his lips, so again, that's curiosity and fascination for what he's doing. Like the saying goes, a picture's worth 1,000 words. But they need a way to be interpreted, and you just need literacy.
Should we give that to them? He said that, what did you say again?
Straight lips.
We said straight face means that she's strict. What do you think, artist?
No.
No. I think that group's going to remember that if you get close. Okay.
Very few students figured out what the artist's intent was. But the goal was that they make those literal observations and they make evidence-based inferences. And they did that incredibly well, very successful. I was pleased. But I should have warned them and said, don't expect it's always going to match what the artist's intent is. Today, they were reading people. They will use this skill more than they know now.
When I used to go to the museums, they were boring for me. But now they're like interesting because I'm going to look at the picture and see what they're holding, all their expressions, and their settings because they mean something to them. I look at the art different now.